Welcome to Mikael Messenger. It's great to be with you all this evening. I hope you're having a wonderful night and have an exciting lesson to share with you guys tonight. Wow, very, very intriguing stuff we're going to be covering. So buckle your seatbelts. Dorothy, I think Kansas is going bye-bye, you know what I'm saying? And before I continue, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. I want to give some shout-outs to Ann, Robert, Megan, woohoo, David, and Cindy, Lucas, and I'm scrolling through here. Mark is in the mix, all right, and I'm scrolling down. Loyal to the foil. Ooh, I like the rhyme there. Brian Hanfield and Kevin Labs, all right, Angela, the Fellowship, Caleb, awesome. Great to be with you guys tonight, and we are going to be actually in our fellowship after this video, having an after video discussion. And there's also a prayer meeting going on there right now. So if you get bored with this, you can go over there and pray if you like. But I think you're going to find this pretty interesting. But they'll probably be going even when we're done. So be sure to click the first link in our description so you can join our fellowship. It's free, and you can join us there after this video, and we'll have some after video chat time together. Guys, this is really some exciting stuff, and I was thinking of waiting until tomorrow, but man, God was just like, no, you got to bring it on tonight. You know what I'm saying? So, all right, so check this out. As you know, there are UFOs flying around the world. Not like those who have ever looked into UFOs don't already know about such phenomenon, but interestingly, they're really hyping it up now. Have you noticed? It's becoming the latest craze to see UFOs in the sky. Makes you wonder why. Well, we're going to explore a little bit of that. And we're also going to look at the concept of rapture. Again, the word rapture is not in the Bible, but there is a concept called harpazo, and that is in the Bible, a gathering away, a snatching away. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that and the concept of whether that is something that's imminent, something that happens at the end. We do know it happens. It's in 1 Thessalonians 4. So, if you're new to the concept and you're like, oh, that's hogwash, that's crazy. Well, it is in the Bible. So what we have to understand is when does this take place? And I think we're going to find some interesting things tonight that point to that. But before we get to that, I want to talk about this UFO connection and really the interesting connection that it has with Passover. And as you may remember, we have a video here called Nissan 10. I actually changed the name to Lamb Selection Day. And if you look at the title, it's called He Will Gather His Elect. Is This the Day? I encourage you to check out that video. It's very intriguing regarding dates related to Passover. Well, we're going to talk a little bit about that today because that's kind of what we're moving toward here. But as you know, they've been talking about UFOs, and this senator yesterday said, lock your doors tonight. We don't know what's out there. We don't know if it's aliens. We don't know what it is. Lock up your daughters, lock the doors, right? And so kind of an intriguing statement to make. He's kind of a humorous senator, so he may have just been, speaking in jest. It was kind of a parting comment there. But nevertheless, you kind of wonder, okay, what's really going on here? Well, I'm reminded of a time when I was young, and there was a movie called Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Many of you may remember that movie. And in that movie, there was a time when the aliens come to a house, and the mom is like, close the door, and the little kid runs over, and he opens the door. And unfortunately, the aliens snatch him away, and the mom is, of course, very distraught about this, and that carries on through the rest of the movie. Also, recently, we've seen a couple movies come out, one called Don't Look Up, that came out recently, basically about meteors hitting the earth, and don't look up, basically telling you don't look at what's really going on out there. Another movie called Nope, where in the movie they're like, don't look up, and that was kind of the whole thing. Don't look at the aliens, don't look into the sky. And so it made me think about lockdown. And their desire to bring that back, because they love that lockdown, because they can accomplish so much during that time when we are out of the way. And so it made me think of, wow, what a great idea to have a fake alien invasion as a way to get people to stay in their house, right? Because if you say, hey, don't go outside, there's UFOs, there's aliens, you might get attacked. Don't look up. Don't look out your window. Just close yourself in, hide yourself away, and we'll let you know when it's safe to come out again. And in the meantime, we'll go around and make sure that you're really human, and to do that, we're going to have to, give you a little poison and a little mark, just to make sure we know that you are who you say you are. So it's kind of the perfect scheme or scam to play on the public and to get everybody freaking out and running for the hills. And we've talked about this in several different videos. I did this video back in April of 2021, and all about the idea of a fake alien invasion, trying to mask the return of Christ. Now, in this video, I talked about the idea that they might try to say the return of Christ was a fake alien invasion. And that's kind of what I'm pointing out, I guess, a little bit today as well. But the idea that they may, that's one concept. But also in this, this is actually not the video. This is, I referenced this, the video I did in 2021 in this current video that I have on my channel called Fake Alien Invasion to Hide the Rapture. But I also talk about in there the concept that they may fake a rapture. They may fake Jesus returning in order to make people think they missed the rapture. So it's kind of a two ways to look at that coin. But today I want to look at it a little bit, kind of along the same lines, but a little bit differently in relation to Passover. Because if you remember, at Passover, God told Moses to tell the Israelites to take, in Exodus 12, he says, take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood into a basin, put some of the blood on the top and both the sides of the door frame. Not one of you shall go out the door of his house until morning. Okay, so basically God is creating a lockdown here. Isn't that interesting? So God actually was the first one to see. Satan's not original. Satan doesn't, Satan's not a creator. He's a destroyer. He can't come up with anything himself. So God is the one who came up with the concept of lockdown, actually. And in this case, he was locking down the Israelites to protect them because he was going to bring his destruction. It says, when the Lord goes through the land to strike down the Egyptians, he will see the blood on top of the sides of the doorframe and will pass over that doorway, hence the term Passover, and he will not permit the destroyer to enter the house and strike you down. So God created the first lockdown, right? And he told the Israelites, you got to go inside your house, put the blood over your door, because that will protect you. That will let me know that you are mine, and I will not harm you when I bring this destruction upon the land. Well, it's interesting that with this whole concept of the UFOs, in a sense, they could do a reverse Passover. That instead of the good folks, you could say, the Israelites, God's chosen people being the ones who are locked down, it could be the reverse. It could be that they are basically trying to keep you from getting raptured, keep you from the good thing that's coming, keep you from Jesus coming back to save you. That they say, hey, don't look up, go in your house, don't pay attention to that. Imagine this. If you got the whole world to go inside and you convince them you cannot look outside. If you look outside, the aliens will see you and they will grab you. So you have got to stay inside. Keep those blinds closed. Do not look out for the next 24 hours or, whatever they say. And so most people would do that, right? And so then they come around the next day and they say, oh, all right, well, you can come out now, or you can at least open your blinds, in the news, the false prophet that's feeding you is saying, we're happy to say the aliens are gone, but we regret to inform you that many people were taken. Many people were abducted by the aliens, and they're no longer with us. And if you didn't see it with your own eyes and you didn't witness it for yourself, you might believe that. You might believe that, and some people say, no, I saw it. It was Jesus. It was a rapture. Oh yeah, come on, get out of here. Right. And the majority of people wouldn't believe it, just like they don't believe it now. Just like when you try to tell them now it's a poison and people are dying right and left and they still don't want to believe. Right. So it's the same concept. They're going to do the same thing. Oh no. They were abducted. Those were aliens. They were talking for UFOs for weeks before that happened. See, they're already talking about it now. They're trying to get it pumped up so that you buy into the lie. So in a sense, it's like a reverse Passover. So instead of the people of God's people hiding, it's the people who don't believe that are hiding. And God's people are actually the ones that are supposed to be looking up, right? Now, just to add to that, There were 3 days of darkness that preceded that Passover, the original Passover. So kind of intriguing. Makes you think of the EMP that they're threatening. Will there be a 3 days of darkness that goes along with this Passover or Rapture and or UFO alien invasion? Whatever they're trying to, whatever gimmick they're going with next. The other thing that hit me too was interesting about this is I thought about the different plagues that God brings upon the Israelites. And, others have also drawn conclusions, connections to the book of Revelation, but often they go in order. And I was thinking, well, if it's a reverse Passover, what if the plagues are also reversed in a sense? So think about this. You have death of the firstborn. Well, Jesus was the firstborn, and he's the firstborn who died and then was resurrected. Those who would be raptured would be God's firstborn or the first harvest. And then you have this time of darkness. Then we have locusts and hail. We know in the beginning of Revelation, there's hail. We get these locust type creatures. People get boils on their skin, or they get injured on their skin. And there's a lot of we know livestock are going to be dying out and flies. And then I just maybe think the flies and the gnats is because now you got all these dead bodies, from all the plagues that come. You've got all these flies and gnats. That's all that's left flying around. Maybe some frogs. Then God brings in to eat the flies because there's so many of them. And then you've just got a big pool of blood, and then Jesus comes back and the grapes of wrath, so to speak, are the winepress of his wrath is done there with the blood up to the horse's bridle. So I thought it might be interesting, a chiasmus, if you will. We've been talking a lot about that. Chiasmus is like a palindrome, it's the same forwards as it is backwards. And it'd be interesting if God did it one way, in the beginning, and then he does it in the reverse going out, just like it would be a reverse Passover concept there. And so, it's interesting, too, that God, just to kind of wrap up this Passover sign, then I'm going to move into like another aspect of this with the rapture concept. But on that day, in Exodus 8, in a couple places, God basically says, He protected the land of Goshen and didn't bring any destruction on them. So I know many who maybe aren't willing to accept the concept of the rapture are saying, no, you're going to have to go through the tribulation. We're going to address that today. But this idea, no, you got to go through the tribulation, and, God will protect you just like he protected Noah in the ark, or Lot got to go somewhere else. And then these people, Israelites, were protected in the land of Goshen. So it is, just to be fair, I want to share those scriptures. In Exodus 8, it says, "But on that day I'll deal differently with the land of Goshen, where my people live. No swarms of flies will be there, so that you will know that I, the Lord, am in this land." Also in Exodus 9, he says, "And the next day the Lord did it. All the livestock of the Egyptians died, but not one animal belonging to the Israelites died." And then also in 9:26, the only place it did not hail was the land of Goshen, where the Israelites were. So God was protecting the Israelites on the earth. There's no question about that. And we do see that also in Revelation chapter 12, where God prepares a place for his church for 1,260 days, where they are protected in essence. And you can argue that's what God's doing now as well. He's protecting his flock until he takes them away. However, I think what we're going to see today is that is going to be that protection is slightly different than the rapture and the arpazo. The rapture, again, is a common term that's used, but arpazo as it's described in the Bible. So let's take a look at that concept together, shall we? Okay, so Revelation chapter 1. It's interesting that God, or Jesus, from the very beginning of Revelation, it describes Jesus in the picture, which in and of itself is kind of intriguing, because if Jesus doesn't come till the end of Revelation, why are we seeing him at the beginning? So that in itself is kind of interesting. And then the way it describes him, it says, "Look, he's coming with the clouds." So it's very interesting they put that at the beginning of Revelation, that he's coming with the clouds, which is how we see him returning in Matthew 24 and Mark 13, for example, which is different, maybe not quite the same as what we see in Revelation 19 and 20. We'll talk a little bit more about that. But look, he says, "Look, he's coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him, even those who pierced him," right? That's Zechariah 14. Those who pierced him will mourn. Matthew 24 also says they will mourn for him when they see him, and they will weep. "And all the peoples of the earth will mourn because of him, so shall it be. Amen. I am the Alpha and the Omega." So that's interesting. We see this term a lot, coming with the clouds. But it never says that he actually sets foot on the earth. It just says he comes with the clouds. So that's kind of interesting. Also, several several times Jesus says, I'm coming soon, I'm coming soon, I'm coming soon, I'm coming soon. He says that throughout the book of Revelation, I'm coming soon. And so you think about this, you say, okay, well, if he's coming soon, it's the difference between what is imminent and what is expected, okay? And, if someone says, well, you're going to have to go through the tribulation and then Jesus will come back, well, then that's not really imminent, right? Because we know that we shouldn't even be thinking about Jesus coming back until after the tribulation, right? If going with that logic, if that's the logic, then that would be, that you'd have to think of it that way. Because if you're saying, well, no, you got to go through the tribulation first and then Jesus comes back, then basically you're saying, well, then it's not imminent. Then Jesus is not going to come until after that point, which means I don't have to think about Jesus coming back. But if that's the argument, then I would say that the Bible challenges that argument, and the Bible is not compatible really with that argument, and the words of Jesus are not compatible with that argument either. And we're going to see that, I believe, today. But let's just start with his wrath, okay? So let's say, okay, well, maybe we do go through some tribulation. I'm playing both sides. I'm presenting both sides here. So let's say, okay, maybe we go through some of the tribulation, which some argue maybe we already have. Go check out that Nissan 10 video I was talking about. Gone through some of it. But in any case, whether it's to start now or we've been going through it because people are dying right and left, however you want to look at that. But let's say we have to go through some of it, okay? But what about his wrath? Is God going to bring his wrath upon his children? Now, again, you can say, well, he's going to protect us a land of Goshen style. But, what's interesting about that is God didn't really rescue them at that point. They were still there. They were still going through trouble and strife, and they had to deal with, man's tribulation of bricks without straw and things like that. And they weren't really taken out until following that Passover meal, and then they were taken out of Dodge. But let's look at a few scriptures about this. So, in 1 Thessalonians 1, it says, they tell you how you turn to God from idols to serve the living and true God and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who rescues you from the coming wrath. Okay, so right there, God is saying, okay, I'm going to rescue you from the wrath. Okay, so if we can at least start here, can we find agreement that God is not going to let us go through his wrath? Now, you can argue whether it's going to be in the wilderness, Revelation 12, or whether he's going to literally take us off the planet because he's going to bring his wrath upon the whole world. But either way, it says that Jesus is going to rescue us from the coming wrath. Also in 1 Thessalonians 5, it says, for God did not appoint us to suffer wrath, but to receive salvation through our Lord Jesus Christ. So again, we're not going to suffer wrath. So that's reassuring, right? That's encouraging right there, that God's not going to bring his wrath upon us because he loves us, right? Makes sense. Okay, Revelation 3, Jesus says, since you have kept my command to endure patiently, I will also keep you from the hour of trial that is going to come upon the whole world to test those who live on the earth. Now that's interesting. So he's not just saying I'm not going to bring my wrath upon you, but then I'm going to keep you from the entire hour of trial, not just a half hour, right? It's not 30 minutes he's keeping us from. He's keeping from the whole hour of trial that's going to come upon the whole world. Now, here's what you got to keep in mind. It's true that in the case of Noah, Noah was put on an ark, but he wasn't taken off the earth, right? And neither was Lot. But God was also planning on mankind continuing after that point. After this, there's not going to be any continuing of business as usual. There's going to be a whole new paradigm, a whole new millennial kingdom that Jesus is going to bring in. And it's going to be a whole nother dynamic where Jesus is actually going to live with us on the earth. So that's a whole different situation than someone who has to stay on the earth because, life continues and you got to have kids and have the next generation and so forth. But this is different because following this, he's going to have the resurrected with him who assumedly aren't going to be having necessarily families and children. I don't know, but I don't think it's going to be that dynamic anymore. It would seem that we're going to reign with him on the earth, and it's going to be something quite different than what we're experiencing right now. So it makes sense then if he's like, listen, I got to bring this devastation on the whole earth, and it's very complicated for me to try to take care of every little child of mine who's floating here, there, and everywhere, because not all of them are probably going to make it to the wilderness, and I got to bring some serious wrath here, and I don't want them to get hit. So it's logical that God's going to say, I got to get them out of the way, right? And unless he whisks them all up with angels, which what we're going to see here, it'd be kind of hard for him for that to be guaranteed. Now we do know in Revelation he does send out his angels, says, hey, don't hurt anybody who has the mark on their forehead, right? So there is that side of it, but that happens after he takes a group out, which we're going to talk about here. So anyway, here in Revelation 3 says, I'm going to keep you from that whole hour of trial because it's going to come on the whole world, and I've got to protect you from that. Okay, let's keep going. Okay, in Isaiah 26, and I did a video on this, check it out. It's called The 7 R's That Prove a Pre-Wrath Rapture. And in Isaiah 26, we get those 7 R's. And basically what we see is that God first resurrects his children. He says, your dead will live, their bodies will rise, those who dwell in the dust will wake up, shout for joy, your dew is like the dew of morning, etc. And then they go into some rooms where he shuts the door behind them and he hides them until his wrath has passed by or passed over. Interesting timing there. You could even argue that word by may even be interpreted as over, which could be a hint, wink, wink to Passover. But very interesting. And he says, see, the Lord is coming out of his dwelling. Then he comes out of the dwelling to punish the people of earth for their sins. Because he's not going to punish his children. He's not going to bring his wrath upon his children. They're hiding in the rooms. And Jesus talked about that in John 14 when he says, in my Father's house are many rooms. I'm going to prepare a place for you, and I'm going to come back to bring you to that place. Well, the only time he could bring us to that place would be in a rapture type scenario, because after that, we're living with him on earth. So there really is no other time for him to come back and bring us and take us to those prepared rooms. But we see that here in Isaiah 26, even before Jesus talked about that. Okay, let's dig a little deeper. Okay, so let's look at Luke chapter 21. Okay, so in Luke 21, Matthew 24, and Mark 13, we get descriptions of the end times. And Jesus' disciples ask him, how are we going to know when these things go down and so forth? And so he gives them a bunch of things that are going to happen, right? And what's interesting here in verse 28 of Luke 21, he says, when these things begin to take place. Let me read that again. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. Now, that's kind of a curious thing for him to say, because if our redemption is not until after all these things have taken place, right, at the end of the tribulation, then we're going to be standing and looking for a long time. It's almost to the point of being silly, right? Now, you could say, well, maybe that's the idea. We need to watch and pray. But then why are we watching and praying if we know he's not coming until afterwards? You see? It's like saying, I know that, after the first half of the game, there's a halftime, for example, with the Super Bowl or something. Well, you're not going to stand at the beginning of the game looking for halftime, right? Because halftime doesn't come until after the first 2 quarters, right? So you're going to wait until halftime for halftime. And so it's not logical that he's going to say when these things begin to take place. It would make more sense for him to say when these things begin or are almost done, when these things are finally finished, then stand up and lift up your heads because your redemption is drawing near. So already it's kind of curious, right? Because he's saying you need to be looking at the beginning, not at the end. Okay. And then if we go a little bit further down, he says, for it will come upon all those who live on the face of the whole earth. Once again, very similar to what we just read, right? I'm going to save you from the hour of trial coming on the face of the whole earth. He says it again here. It will come upon all who live. All who live, not just some, but all. See, the problem is this. If you're going to do things like pollute the water and there's no food and so on and so forth, it's going to be very difficult to keep your children alive when there's no water to drink and when there's no food to eat, right? So it's going to be very hard. It was one thing when he sent Joseph there, for example, to do the 7 years of famine and then bring all the Israelites down so he could take care of them and so on and so forth. But when this is coming on the whole face of the earth, there's not going to be an Egypt, for the Israelites to go to. There's not going to be a land of Goshen for them to go to because it's coming on the whole face of the earth. So it'd be very difficult for God to be like, I got my kids over here. Elijah was one guy he could take care of and send some ravens and with some food and water when there was no water coming on the earth. But when the whole earth has been polluted and destroyed, it's very difficult. So it makes more sense for God to say, you know what? let me just get them out of the way. It'd be a lot easier if I just get my kids out of the way so I can bring my wrath, right? Because that's what Isaiah 26 describes. He says, and then he says this, he says, be always on the watch and pray. Well, now, if it doesn't happen until after the tribulation, why do we have to be always on the watch? I mean, we know he's not coming until the end, right? Or do we? It says, be always on the watch and pray that you may be able to escape all that is about to happen. Okay, well, if I can escape all that is about to happen, and it comes on the face of all of those, it comes upon all those who live on the face of the earth. Does that leave anybody out? Does that leave out God's children? So it's going to come upon all those who live on the face of the earth, but he says, I should always watch and pray. He makes it sound like it's imminent, like it could happen anytime, that I may be able to escape all that's about to happen. Well, how can I escape if it's coming upon everyone on the entire face of the earth, right? Well, it sounds like the redemption is what's drawing near, right? Not, your safety is drawing, like not like, oh, I'm going to care for you, but no, your redemption is what's drawing near. He says, you're going to be able to escape and you'll be able to stand before the Son of Man. Isn't that interesting? Because that's exactly what's described in Revelation, in Thessalonians, this idea that we will stand before him, that we will be gathered to him. Okay, let's keep going. Let's look a little bit deeper. Okay, so here in Luke 21, let me just to clarify this, as Luke 21 says, when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption is drawing near. Remember, the world is telling you, don't look up, right? That's what that movie says. Don't look up, right? It's saying, don't look up. It's saying, nope, don't. There's no salvation coming from above. Look down, don't look, right? So that's the way the world is trying to get you to think about this. But God is saying, no, look up, and lift up your heads. So, you can't stand there for 7 years, right, in that position. Obviously, this has an immediacy to it. It has an imminency to it. It says, and when these things become to pass, then look up and lift up your heads. Your redemption is drawing nigh. Well, interesting word, redemption, because that's exactly what's described here over in, let's see, where is it? Where'd you go, redemption? This one, I think. In Romans 8, it says, not only so, but we ourselves who have the first fruits of the Spirit, we groan inwardly as we wait eagerly for our adoption as sons, the redemption of our bodies. Well, the redemption of our bodies, that's something that happens when we are transformed, as described in 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Thessalonians 4, right? That we're made into new creations, right? That we will be changed in the twinkling of an eye. Right, that's the redemption of our bodies. So what we're waiting for in Luke 21 is that. We're not waiting for some food to come, the food wagon, or some way to get to the wilderness so that we can hold out for 3.5 years. No, we're waiting for the redemption of our bodies. Specifically, that's what's drawing near, is the fact that we're about to be changed and transformed. So that's really intriguing. Now, a couple other things here. Let me see. Things got misplaced here. Now, talking about escape, okay, just for comparison's sake, it says, pray that you may be able to escape, which means we can. But it also says in 1 Thessalonians 5, while people are saying peace and safety, destruction will come on them suddenly as labor pains on a pregnant woman, and they will not escape. So he makes a distinction between those who can escape and those who will not escape as well. Let me see here. So yes, I want to share this, but I first want to share, hold on. I still have it open here. Okay. Wait. Oh, no, it's this one. Sorry. It's Luke. Is it this one? Oh, maybe it is this one. Oh, no, it's Luke. I'm sorry. It's Mark 13. Mark 13. Okay. Sorry, things got kind of shuffled here. And I don't even know if I still have it open. So let me just go over here through this one. Okay, so that you can stand before the Son of Man. So in Mark 13, we dig a little bit deeper into this, okay? Thanks for hanging with me here. Sometimes when you're live, things get a little shuffled around. And you just keep going. That's what you do. All right, so Mark 13. Okay, now this is interesting. So Mark 13, Matthew 24, he's describing the things that must take place. And here is a common misconception that happens here in Mark 13 and Matthew 24. And I would even argue what appears to be a mistranslation. And you're like, oh, a mistranslation? How dare you say such a thing? And but it's true. Actually, I think I had it here. Here it is. Okay, so Mark 13. Okay, so Mark 13, basically Jesus is describing, they're asking, well, what are the things we should be looking for? Now, again, he's saying you got to be looking for these things. But remember, he says, when these things begin to take place, look up, because your redemption is drawing near. So you're not going to have to wait till the end. You're not even going to have to wait till the middle. You just got to look for the beginning. You just got to look for these things to start. And I think we've already started to see some of these things are beginning to take place, arguably. But let's look a little deeper at this concept. So in Mark 13, similar to Matthew 24, it says, but in those days, after that tribulation. Okay, now this is where people get confused. And like I say, I believe more and more that this is actually a mistranslation. I'm going to show you why I believe that. But it says, but in those days, what it says there, in both the KJV and the NIV, it says, after that tribulation of those days, or, and so forth, after the stress of those days, same word, thalipsis is tribulation, it says, the sun shall be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light. Okay, and then it goes on to describe the stars of heaven shall fall. Hey, thanks for subscribing, Bruce. Appreciate it. Praise the Lord. And the stars of heaven shall fall, the powers that are in heaven shall be shaken, and then they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and then shall he send his angels, and shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from the uttermost part of the earth to the uttermost part of heaven. Now, that's interesting too. Why would he have to gather them from heaven and earth? Well, because you've got souls in heaven that have to be put back in their bodies so they can be resurrected. And then you got the people on earth who also need to be snatched away as well. So that's very intriguing. But let's look at this term, after that. Okay, because this is where it gets people get tripped up. And this is why people say, well, then it has to be after. But remember what Jesus said. He said, right, I'm going to save you from that tribulation. I'm going to save you from that wrath. When this begins, be looking up because your redemption is drawing nigh. I'm going to save you from the whole hour of trial, right? And so here they get to this scripture and say, well, but what does this mean? It says after that tribulation. Well, look at what it says. It says, in those days. It doesn't say after those days, right? So it's going to happen in those days, the days he's just been describing, right? It doesn't happen after, otherwise you say, but after those days, right? And if you look at the word here, the original word in, just to show you that, it does not and cannot mean after, okay? It can mean in, it can mean by, it can be with. So you could say with those days, by those days, in those days, but not after those days. Now, what's interesting about this word that's often translated as after, arguably mistranslated, is that it actually means with, almost 4 times more than it means after. What do you think about that? Okay, so with, it means, it's used in the Bible as with 345 times, but after only 88 times. Now, let me show you a couple examples of this, okay? So here, for example, it says, behold, a virgin will be with child, she'll bring forth a son, they shall call his name Emmanuel, which in being interpreted is God with us. Now, you wouldn't say God after us, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Obviously, God with us makes sense. And God after us sounds like putting us before God. So that obviously would not be correct. Or, for example, Matthew 16, it says, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father with his angels, and then he shall reward every man according to his works. It wouldn't make sense if it says, for the Son of Man shall come in the glory of his Father after his angels, right? Because again, it would say the angels are coming before Jesus. Same word, meta, okay? It's the same word. So almost 4 times more, if you were to do 4 times 88, for example, is how many times it's used as after. That's 352, and I believe it was, 348? Or 345, so pretty close. About 7 more, and it'd be 4 times more that it's used as with. So I would argue that this deserves to be one more of those times, because if you look at everything else that Jesus describes, and if you look at the actual scripture that it's referring to there in Luke, it says with. Where was I? Oh, I got to go back. It says in those days. It says in those days, not after those days, In those days. And again, that is a direct translation from the Greek. In, it can only mean in, with, or by, does not mean after. So what appropriately this should say, but in those days, with the tribulation, or in the midst, arguably means like in the midst. And actually, if you look at the real meaning of that word, 33:26. Let me show you here. Go back over there for a second. If you go down here, it says with, after, behind, amid, right here, properly denoting accompaniment, or amid, or in the midst. I like to say in the midst, but amid, okay, amid those times. So amid the tribulation, like within the tribulation, basically is what it's saying. In those days, within the tribulation, or in the midst of the tribulation. And you could argue that we're somewhat in the midst because, like I say, people have been being poisoned for years now, and more people are dying than all the world wars combined because of it. So, but in those days, in the midst of that tribulation, or amid that tribulation, or with that tribulation, the sun shall be dark and the moon shall be, turned to blood, etc. And then Jesus comes and gets his kiddos out, right? Because he's got to get them out before he brings the wrath, right? Because up to this point, it's not wrath, right? But interesting here, and you can even back it up here to Mark 13. It says, or Mark 13:19. It says, "In those days shall be affliction, such as was not from the beginning of creation, which God created unto this time, neither shall be. And except that the Lord had shortened those days, no flesh would be saved. For the elect's sake, whom he hath chosen, he hath shortened the days." Right? So you could argue, that goes back to the argument of is it a 7 year, is it a 3.5 year? You could argue with Jesus, being the sacrifice in the middle of the week, perhaps that is how he shortened the days to just 3.5 years. But in any case, the bottom line is it's those days. It's in those days. It's not after those days. It's not far from those days. It's in those days with the tribulation that all of this takes place, which changes the whole game, obviously, right? So again, think of it logically. If Jesus is saying, listen, you got to be ready. I'm going to show you some more scriptures about this. But it's like, if he's saying you got to be ready, I could come at any time. You don't know when I'm going to come. Oh, yeah, we do, Jesus. You come after the tribulation. You see? See how that argument doesn't work? Right? So it has to be in the midst of the tribulation. In fact, I would argue that it has to be. Otherwise, the other statements Jesus makes would not be logical. Right? He can't say, hey, I could come any time. And you're like, nah, you come after the tribulation. Right? But if you're like, yeah, he could come anytime because a lot of these things have happened already. And it says in the beginning of these things, I should be looking up, and it says in those days that it's going to happen. So yeah, at any point he could come, right? That's the only way it makes sense. Otherwise, you're saying, no, I'm waiting for the heads to roll. When I start seeing the guillotines pulled out, then I might start looking for Jesus. But until then, you got a lot to go through. How many times I get those comments? Oh, you got a lot of tribulation to go through, buddy, till you're going to get to that. Well, that doesn't sound like what Jesus said. That doesn't sound like I got to watch and pray then. It doesn't sound like I need to be ready to go, because if I got a lot of stuff to go through, right? You see how those two don't jive, how that doesn't work? So it has to be. I would argue that it has to be in the midst. It has to be in those days. It has to be at the beginning of those days, even arguably, because the farther you get in, the more you're going to be like, oh man, I guess, well, finally they're cutting people's heads off. I guess Jesus is coming soon, right? So you wouldn't be looking for him at any time. But as you know, as you go through the things he describes, a lot of those things have happened. Persecution, false messiahs, wars, all those things have kind of happened. In fact, you could say maybe throughout history, God kind of did different cycles of it to get people looking, to get people going, whoa, boy, this guy in World War II, with the funny mustache, he seems like he could be an antichrist. Man, maybe we should be looking for Jesus, right? Nah, that's not going to happen for a long, if you always have that kind of attitude, then you're never going to be watching and praying, right? So Jesus goes on about this, when he says, no one knows about that day or hour. Yeah, we do. It's after the tribulation. No, it's not, right? It's with the tribulation. It's in the midst of the tribulation, and it's in those days. It's at the beginning, arguably, of those days that your redemption draws near. But let's keep going. So he says, no one knows about that day or hour, not even the angels in heaven or the Son, but only the Father, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will be at the coming of the Son of Man. For in the days before the flood, people were eating, drinking, marrying, giving in marriage, and up to the day Noah entered the ark. Guys, do you understand what the new world of the order wants to do to you? You're not going to be doing any of this stuff. They want to put brain chips in you. They want to mark you, chip you, tag you like a piece of cattle, like a piece of meat, and they want you to eat the bugs and all these kinds of things. You're not going to be enjoying life. He's describing something like, hey, they were enjoying life. Life was good. I mean, you go to Sodom and Gomorrah, the same thing happens with Lot, right? And I think I have that open here too. It says it was the same in the days of Lot. People were eating and drinking, buying and selling, planting and building. But the day Lot left Sodom, fire and sulfur rained down from heaven, destroyed them all. He tried to get his sons-in-law to come with, and they just laughed at him. You're so crazy. Give me a break. The rapture, the tribulation. Come on. Get real, dude. Man, we're loving life. We're enjoying life here. And then bam, boom, right? There was no warning. There was no, oh, man, it's got to get a lot worse first. There was none of that. It was like, hey, yeah, life is good, That's how they were feeling in the days of Lot. That's how they were feeling in the days of Noah. And then wham, suddenly a flood comes and washes them all away, right? That's what he says. It says they had no idea here in Matthew. It says, they knew nothing about what would happen until the flood came and took them all away. That's how it's going to be at the coming of the Son of Man. So if you're expecting to see all this tribulation first, I have to say, biblically, it would seem you got it wrong, friend, that's not how it's going to go down. What we see in the Bible is Jesus is like, man, you don't know when it's going to come. It could come anytime. I'm coming soon. I could be there tomorrow. I could be there today. You don't know when I'm coming. Okay? So don't rest at ease and think, oh, I'll just wait until that time comes along. No, doesn't work like that. When these guys got hit with Noah, man, they were just living life as usual. And I guarantee you guys, man, as this tribulation kicks in, it's not going to be life as usual, right? It's going to be lockdowns and tyranny. That's what we're looking forward to. And, and think about it. You're the Christian, right? So you're the Christian. You know what's up. What are you going to be doing? You're going to be hanging around and being like, yeah, and then it talks about one's taken and the other's left. Two are in bed, one's at a hand mill, just kind of doing work. They're in the field, just kind of doing things as normal. One's taking the other left. It's like, whoa, what just happened? If you go through 7 years of trial, you're not going to be like, what just happened? You'll be like, that's Jesus, man. I heard about that for 7 years. You're not going to be surprised. It's not going to shock you. You're going to be like, where is he already? For crying out loud, right? But it's got to be at a time when most people aren't going to see that coming. They're not going to expect that coming. They're going to be like, what? And in Revelation, right, in Revelation 12, for example, if you're saying, well, those people are hiding out. Well, they're not living life as usual. Those people that are hiding out in the wilderness, that's not life as usual. Because in Revelation 13, it says that the beast is able to conquer the saints. And those who go into captivity. Those who are killed by the sword get killed by the sword. And then we see in Revelation 20 that these people get their heads cut off. So that's not life as usual, okay? That's not like, oh, I'm so surprised. It came right after the beheadings. That's not surprising. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's not life. That's not Noah, the time of Noah. That's not the time of Lot. That's the time of Satan, right? That's the time of hell on earth. That's a time of horror beyond horrors, right? That's not anything you're going to be like, oh yeah, okay, I'm so surprised, right? So the whole point is that it has to happen before those things happen, or it won't be a surprise. It's not going to be a surprise if it happens after all that stuff. By the time that happens, you're like, yeah, about time. You're going to be like, man, where were you, Jesus? I've been waiting, right? So it's just not logical. When he's saying you got to watch and pray because you don't know when I'm going to come. He's saying here, therefore keep watch because you don't know when the owner of the house will come back. Yeah, we do. He comes at the end of the tribulation. So that's what a lot of people say in comments. It's like, well, Jesus has told you don't know. So if that's how you're thinking, man, you better think again. That's not what Jesus is saying. He's not saying, oh yeah, don't worry. He could have said to them, hey, but don't worry. I come at the end. You just hide out in the wilderness and be cool. It's like, no, man, you're not going to know when it's going to come. It's going to surprise you. In fact, when these things start, you better look up because your redemption is almost here. It's about to come. At the beginning. When it starts to happen. So he says, keep watch. You don't know when the owner of the house comes back. He says, you don't know if it's going to be in the evening or at midnight or when the rooster crows or at dawn. Basically, he's saying, hey, it could be at any point of the journey, right? So don't be thinking, oh, it's not till the end. That's not logical, right? And that doesn't go along with what Jesus taught. Otherwise, you wouldn't need to keep watch and pray. You'd know it's at the end, right? Oh, I know when halftime is. Yeah, I know when the game's over. Right? So it has to be at an unexpected time. That's the only thing that's logical. Matthew 25, therefore keep watch because you do not know the day or the hour. And he makes that point there in Matthew 24 where he's like, it'll be good, faithful. Who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master's put in charge of his servants to give them their food at the proper time? It'll be good for that servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he'll put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that servant's wicked and says to himself, my master is staying away a long time. Right? That's exactly what people are saying. They're like, no, we got to go through a lot more before Jesus can come back. Right? So they think they can just live it up, stay in their sin, keep living for the devil, and not repent, not get their life together, not get right with God. And they start to beat their fellow servants and mock them and say, you guys watching for the rapture, you're crazy. Eat and drink. And the master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, and in an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Gee, Jesus, could you be a little more graphic next time? Jesus is not pulling any punches here, guys. He's telling you exactly what's going to go down, and you're not going to want to be the guy who gets cut to pieces because you were like, he's not coming to the end, right? That's not logical. It's not biblical. Doesn't match up. Doesn't match up to the Bible that I'm reading. So, okay. So a couple more thoughts on this before I wrap this and tie it with a bow. So we get to Revelation chapter 6, right? And that's what we have here. We got people who were not expecting this to happen, right? They did not think it would happen at this moment, right? And they're like, oh man, what just happened? And what do we have? It's an exact match to Matthew 24. Also matches Ezekiel 38, you can argue. But Matthew 24, where the moon turns to blood and the sun turns dark, just like Jesus described. And what does he do at that point? He sends his angels to gather his elect from the heaven and from earth. That's what he does at that time. In those days, not after those days, in those days. That's when he does it with the tribulation. That's when he does it. And in Matthew 24, just along those same lines, before I move on to this, but Matthew 24, it actually says, where is it? It says immediately with. So it doesn't, again, it's like when these things begin to happen. So this is immediately with. Again, this word after is meta, which as we know means with almost 4 times more, or I should say it's translated as with almost 4 times more. So I would argue this is one more time that should have been translated that way, but people don't want to see it that way because they're not looking at the whole picture. This is immediately with the distress of those days. In the beginning, when these things begin to happen, in those days, the sun will be dark and the moon will not give its light, stars will not fall, etc., etc. The sign, at that time, the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. All the nations on earth will mourn, right? That's what we read before. That's what we see in Zechariah 2. They will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of the sky with power and glory. They're going to cry. They'll be like, oh man, I didn't expect that right now. And he will send his angels with a loud trumpet call, and they will gather his elect from the 4 winds, from one end of the heavens to the other. So here in Revelation 6, right, that's what happens here. He says, I watched as he opened the 6th seal. There was a great earthquake. The sun turned black like sackcloth, made a goat hair. The whole moon turned blood. Red, the stars fell from the sky like late figs. So everything Jesus described in Matthew 24 and Mark 13. The sky receded like a scroll rolling up, and every mountain and island was removed from its place. Now that's kind of got a double meaning to it if you think about mountain and island, because we are the mountains and the islands if you think about it. We are the little rocks, the little Petros. So that kind of has a double meaning. You could say literally the rocks and the mountains, and we see that in Ezekiel. But you could also argue there's sort of a metaphorical thing there with us as his Christians, his little rocks, his little mountains, right? His little Petroses, because that's what Jesus called Peter. He says, you're Petros. His real name's Simon, but he calls him Petros. He says, because you're like a little rock. You're the chip off the big rock, the Petra, which is me. Jesus Christ saying that it's Jesus Christ. He's the rock. He's the Petra. So, that's kind of cool. In any case, so they're all removed from their place. Wow, that's kind of deep. Then the kings of the earth, the princes, then everybody, all the leftovers, because this wouldn't be us, right? Would we be hiding and say, oh no, hide us from Jesus? No, right? So it says, then the kings of the earth, the princes, the generals, the mighty, and every slave and every free man. So it says, every free man hid in caves and among the rocks of the mountains. Would we do that when Jesus comes back? Is that what we would do? No, right? We'd be like, man, I want to go and be with Jesus. So that means the only men that are left are the ones that weren't taken. That's the only logical conclusion, because we're not going to go hide under the mountains. It says they called on the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of him who sits on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. Well, we wouldn't be hiding from Jesus. We want to see Jesus. We want to go to Jesus, right? We're not going to hide from his wrath because he's not going to bring his wrath upon us, right? So when it says every mountain and island removed from his place, man, that makes me want to do a deep dive on that one. Wow, that's kind of cool, kind of poetic there. But the bottom line is we're not there, guys, because it says everybody hides. Everybody else hides, and we wouldn't be hiding. We would be with him. Well, you know what it says in Revelation 7? It says we are with him. That's exactly what happens. After, Revelation 7, he's holding back the winds. He still hasn't brought his wrath. He's like, oh no, the great day of wrath has come, but he hasn't brought it yet, right? First he seals the 144,000, and then it says after this, and there's that word meta again, you could say with this, I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands, and they cried out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God, who sits on the throne, to the Lamb. All the angels were standing around, etc., etc. Then one of the elders asked me, these in white robes, who are they and where did they come from? I answered, sir, you know. He says, these are they who have come out of or away from, erkomai ek. I've done a lot of studies on that, but that's the Greek, erkomai ek, which means out of or away from the Great Tribulation. Not those who have gone through the Great Tribulation, but those who came out of and away from it, so that they didn't have to go through it. And so you could argue, oh, well, what about the first four seals and so forth? You could argue that some of those are already in play. I mean, there's, the food is happening. They're attacking all those things. And we got war going on, World War III. They're ready to launch NUKEs at us. Everything's going on right now. So you could argue that all that's already in play. But either way, that could all happen in a day too. It's all how you want to look at it, how that unrolls. But the bottom line is, these are those who came out of and away from the Great Tribulation. Okay. And they've washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. And then God brings his destruction. Following this, Revelation 8, then we start getting the hail. Then we start getting all those plagues from Egypt, right? We start getting the hail and the locusts and everything else all starts to unfold after God gets his firstborn, so to speak, out of the picture. So kind of interesting stuff, guys. Would love to get your thoughts in the comments. I want to see what you think about all that, but a lot of these things are happening. For example, how dreadful it will be for pregnant women and nursing mothers in those days. Check out some of the videos we have on that, or the fact that there's false messiahs, right, that are floating around. Check out some of the videos that we have on that. There was supposedly a blood moon last night over the Sea of Galilee, and that wasn't expected. Most blood moons they can plan, they know it's going to be an eclipse or whatever, but this was an unexpected blood moon over the Sea of Galilee. You can check out that as well. And, of course, check out this Nissan 10 video regarding Passover, because Passover, guys, is coming up. And, boy, it would seem a very appropriate time for God to bring all this into play. Again, we should be ready at any time, because if we're not supposed to be ready at any time, then what Jesus says has no weight, right? Has no merit, has no value to watch and pray. And to be ready to escape, But we're seeing the beginning of these things happen, and I think it makes sense, and we should be looking up because our redemption is drawing near. But anyway, the 10th of Nisan is a date to be looking at. Like I say, I have this video. I renamed it Lamb Selection Day because I want you to check that out, the connection there. And that's the day that Moses was told to take the lamb into the home, and then they kill the lamb on Passover. 4 or 5 days later, it's twilight time on the 14th, between 14th and 15th, but at twilight they do it. And so, intriguing, something to think about there. And so be considering that. Guys, it's time to repent. In case you can't figure that out from everyone who we shared today, you want to repent because the kingdom of God, and believe the good news, of course. Faith is a given. Obviously, you have to believe. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. So everyone who comes to him must believe he exists, and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. But the time has been fulfilled, guys, is being fulfilled, and the kingdom of God has come near. Repent and believe the good news. Now's the time. So I hope that you'll join us here. We'll have a little after video chat on this if you'd like to discuss this a little bit more with us. Let's see, where do I have? Oh, it's over here, I think. So I can show you that link. It's in the description. But just go to discord.gg/Makayo Ministries. It's in the description. Click on that link there. And you can come join us right now following this, I'll be there for a few minutes, specifically to talk about this video. Any questions you have, any comments you have, anything you'd like to clarify there or contribute to the conversation, we'd love to have you come over there. You can just listen too. If you'd prefer not to chat, you can just come and listen to what others have to share. But guys, I'm loving you, and I hope you found this beneficial to you in some way. Guys, I'm wishing you all the best and all the blessed, and be looking up because your redemption draws near. Maranatha.